All right, so today's lesson might be a review from Algebra 1 for you, which if it is, awesome. But again, in Algebra 2, we take what you do in Algebra 1 and we take it up a notch, okay? So this is lesson 3.1. So you can write that at the top. This is 3.1, or now here to the side. Relations, functions, domain, and range. So Unit 3 is all about polynomials. So we're going to get away from just x squared. We're going to talk about x cubed, x to the fourth, x to the fifth, all that kind of stuff, okay? So when we talk about the domain and range, we've already talked about that a little bit. What is the domain values? Leanna? All the values of x. So domain is a set of all x values. There's your blank right there. So if domain is all the x values, then range is all of the y values. Good. Okay, it says, given a continuous graph, if you're going to find the domain, you're going to scan the graph from left to right. So if you're thinking about the x-axis, you're going to look from left to right to find out what the domain is. If you are looking for the range, remember the range is the y value, so you're going to be looking up and down. Up and down. So every relation, remember a relation is just a set of ordered pairs. So let's maybe make ourselves a note there. Relation is just a set of ordered pairs. And you guys know ordered pairs are x and y, right? So a relation is a bunch of x's and y's together. So in order for a relation to be a function, okay, so even more specifically to be a function, none of the x values can repeat. So it says a relation must not repeat any x values. Any x values. So no x values can repeat. Y values can. We don't really care about what's going on with y. We just can't have any x values. So when we're looking at a bunch of graphs, and we will today, but if I was looking at some ordered pairs here, if I had like 1, 2, 2, 3, and then if I had 1, 4, this is a relation, right? It's a group of ordered pairs. You guys see that? The domain would be 1 and 2. You don't have to repeat the 1. It would just be 1 and 2. And then the range would be 2, 3, and 4. Do you agree with that? Okay? But do you have an x value that's repeating here? So this would not be a function. This would be a relation, but not a function. If this 1 down here was like a 9 instead, and it's different, now this is a function. Okay? Negative, it doesn't matter. It's different, right? -1 and 1 are not the same thing. So it can be a negative number, that's fine too. Okay? So when given a graph, we're going to use what's called the vertical line test. Has anyone ever heard of the vertical line test before? Yeah. Vertical line test. The vertical line test says that it can only touch the graph one time. So can only touch the graph . Perfect. Say that louder, Brooklyn. Right, if it touches more than once, it's not a function. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at our, I'm going to give you a bunch of different functions. We're going to do 5 of them together. And then at your tables, you can work with your table mates if you want to. We're going to do the other 15 of them. Okay, so there's 20. It's fine. There's only 20 problems. So we're going to look at those to get to today together. So the first one, you have a blank page. It looks like this, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yours looks like this. So this is your answer sheet. And this is what the cards are going to look like, okay? So I'm going to display them up on the board, and we're going to go over them together. So the first one we're going to do is number 3. So go over to where number 3 is on your paper. Okay, it's on the front page, yeah, that box that says number 3. Okay. What?
No, she's talking the answer key is what she wants.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to open this twice. Hang on just a second. All right, here we go. So it says answer the question given the table of values below. First of all, what is the domain? So we talked about the domain is all the x's, right? They're already in numerical order for you from smallest to biggest. So when we write this over here in part A, because that goes to question A, you guys see how that works? 3A, 3A. So we're going to draw brackets because that's how we write the set. So I'm going to say the values of the domain are -2, 0, 4, and 8. Okay? Do your best with the brackets. Do your best with the brackets, please. And then it says, what is the range? What's the y value, the only one we have up here, Olivia? 1. And so we don't have to write 1 4 times. We only write it 1 time with a bracket. And then part C says, so part C says, is this relation a function? Remember, what cannot repeat? X. The x value. So do we have any x values repeating? No. So when you write your answer no, you need to tell me why. So no, x values don't repeat.
It is a function.
Oh, so it...
You said no.
Yes, x values don't repeat. Excuse me.
See, you were paying attention, guys.
I know.
She was only testing.
That's right. I was only testing you. So yes, x values don't repeat. Okay? Questions on that one? Easy peasy. Number 5. So you need to be on number 5 now. Not number 1, not number 3, not number 7, but number 5. Okay, in the box for 5. So this example says, what is the domain here? This diagram is called, does anyone know what this is called? This is called a mapping, and you don't need to write this, but this is a map, okay? So your domain values are here, your range values are here. Okay, so here's all your x's, here's all your y's. What they're saying is -7 matches up with 0. Okay, so that would be the point -7, 0. So that's one of my domain values is -7. Okay, we're not there yet. So then we have 0 matches up with -5 and 0 matches up with 9. So 0 is another of my domain. And then I also have, what's my other domain? 4. Okay, so I have 3 numbers here for my domain. For my range, I have how many numbers? 4 of them, right? So let's go ahead and write in part B, it says what is the range? -5, 0, 3, 9. Any question? Yeah, that's a 9. Any questions on the domain and range part? Okay, now we're checking to see, is this a function or not? Do any of your x values repeat?
Yes.
Yes, Leanna, which one?
0.
0. Do you guys see 0 is going to 2 different numbers? So 0 means that the function or the relation is not a function. So this time we would say no. And then we're going to tell which value repeats, okay? Because you're explaining to me your answer. So 0 value repeats. So you're explaining to me why it's not a function. You're not just writing no, you're explaining why.
Now, when we go back on our notes, because we don't have the 0 going to 2 different places to look at. So what we'll see is 704 and 5039.
So number 9, again it says what is the domain, what is the range. So we're answering the same 3 questions every time, okay? Now this is a line. You guys see that? That's what we're looking at to determine the domain and range of this one. So this is a little bit different. It's not just a list of values. Remember it said when you're looking at the domain, you need to look from left to right? So if I'm looking from left to right, would you agree that eventually all of these x's are going to hit at some point, right? Whether it's here, it's hitting up here, here, it's here, right? Eventually, it's touching all of the x values. Would you guys agree with that?
Have an infinity value here.
That's right. And the arrows mean that it's going to go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So eventually, it's going to take the entire x-axis. The whole thing eventually will get covered, okay? So in this one, our domain, we're going to write from negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay, negative infinity to positive infinity. What about the y values? Remember, when you're talking about the y values, you're supposed to look up and down. So if we're looking at our y values, isn't it touching out here? It's going to touch here, here, right? Eventually, it's touching every y value on this y-axis, right? Eventually, and it's going to keep going, so it's eventually going to touch the entire y-axis. Can you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so for our range values, it's also going to be negative infinity to positive infinity.
Oh, gee, I wonder if I could
This is one where we use the vertical line test, okay? So when you've been given a graph, you'll use the vertical line test to determine whether or not it's a function. Otherwise, we would have to write out each of these points, right? We would have to write out what is this point, what is this point, and that would take a long time, okay? So instead, we're going to draw a vertical line. If you can draw a vertical line anywhere on the graph and it touches at exactly 1 point, right? That vertical line touches at 1 point. What about this vertical line? How many times does it touch? 1 point. What about this? So everywhere it's touching only 1 time. So is this a function? Yes. So you would say, yes, this is a function. And you would say it passes the vertical line test. So we're going to write that it passes the vertical line test.
Is it okay if I just acronym it to like VLT?
Sure, Crystal. Then, let's talk about maybe an example that wouldn't work. What if you have a graph that looks like this? Okay, up here, you guys see where I'm at up here? If I have a graph that looks like this, and I draw a vertical line, if I draw a vertical line here, it's only touching 1 time, which is okay. But what if I draw a vertical line here? How many times does it touch? Twice. So this would not be a function. Okay, so that's kind of a counterexample of what that might look like. Okay? Questions on number 9?
Isn't that a parabola?
It's a sideways parabola, which has a different name. So on 15, what is the domain? So if we look at the domain, again, we're looking left to right for our domain. So if we're looking from left to right, isn't it hitting it here? It's going to hit here, here. Each of these numbers, it's somewhere on the graph, right? And the arrows mean it's going to do what? So what do we know about our domain? Infinite, right? Negative infinity to positive infinity, all real numbers. So negative infinity to positive infinity. But what about the range values? Remember, we're looking up to down, up and down. Does it look like eventually it's going to hit the entire y-axis?
No.
Do you guys agree that on my y-axis at the bottom, it's stopping at what number? At -2, right? It stops here. Would you guys agree with that? At -2? What about the top? Stops at +3. You guys see that? Okay, so as far as my range is concerned, it only goes from -2 up to 3. That's all the range it's going to cover. Okay? So is it touching -2 and 3? It's touching both of them, right? So if it's touching both of them, do you guys remember what symbol we use? What symbol we use to include it?
Oh, the bracket.
There you go, Crystal. We use the brackets, remember? From negative and 2 to 3. That means those numbers are included. What? My head was in the way? Excuse me. I do have a big head.
I thought we was using brackets.
So, I'm sorry, these kinds of brackets, right? So do you see the difference between the two? Okay. Because we want to say it doesn't actually just go up to negative 2, it actually touches negative 2, and that's what the brackets mean. So is this relation a function? Remember, when it's a graph, what do we use when it's a graph? We use that vertical line test, right? So what happens if I draw a vertical line here? It's touching one time. Here, one time. Here, one time. What's happening?
It's a function.
It is a function. It's only ever going to touch
If we're doing it
each
the other
time.
way, it wouldn't be.
Correct. Good,
It has
John.
to be going.
If we did the horizontal line test, which means that it would be 1 to 1, which we're not going to get into today, but yes, good idea. So for vertical line test, it passes, right? So we would say, yes, this is a function. Passes the vertical line test.
But if it didn't, but no, it failed it.
Correct. Yep. Or does not pass, whatever you'd like to say. Yep. Okay, questions on 15.
Got it, you.
You guys are doing all right with this, all right?
Seems pretty straightforward, but
Okay, number 20. So it's the very last corner down here. Number 20, my screen's kind of hiding it. 20. All right. It says, answer the following questions. Again, the same 3 questions. What is the domain? What is the range? And what is this a relation of function? So the graph x equals negative 6. Whenever they give you an equation, I want you to sketch what it would look like. So x equals negative 6 is what kind of a graph here? What kind of a graph is
it's
that?
vertical.
It's a vertical line, right? Remember, if it's just an x number, it's just a straight up and down line. And it's at negative 6. Okay, so everyone draw a vertical line here at negative 6, please.
And guess what?
Wait. Hold that thought. I'll let you answer C, which is what you're trying to answer right now. Telepathy, right there. Okay, so what about our domain values? Remember, we look left to right for the domain. What's the only x value that gets hit? Negative 6, right? So the only x value that we can use is negative 6. So because there's only one, we're going to write it as this. X equals negative 6. Since there's only one value.
You're not even have my perfect bracket going.
All right. What about the range value? Someone who I haven't heard from today. Vinny? What are our range values?
Okay.
Take a good guess.
Good guess.
Does it go all the way up and down the range? All the way up and down the y-axis?
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to. And so when it goes all the way up and down, both ways, what do we call that?
Infinity.
Good. Negative infinity to positive infinity, which is all the real numbers.
Will you just put all the numbers?
Sure. Here's the symbol for all real numbers, if you want to use that.
Really?
Yep, it's the same thing.
That was like
A, yes, a bubble.
the mumble letter R.
Yes.
Ooh, you creative.
I know, girl. Okay, Brooklyn, is this relation a function or not?
Yeah.
Does it pass the vertical line test?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would agree here it doesn't touch, here it doesn't touch, here it doesn't touch. What happens when you draw it here? It's touching the entire thing, right?
Yeah, I agree with
It's touching here, 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 here. Right? So does this pass the vertical line test? No, it does not pass the vertical line test. So we would say no, does not pass, or you can write it fails. Does not pass
No, but is there
vertical
a name
line
for that?
test. What?
Is there a name for that? Like when you have when you
Infinite. No, you're thinking of infinite number of solutions when it's a set line.
yeah.
But that's when you're talking about a system. We're not talking about systems. Okay, any questions on this? All right, so you're going to get a stack of cards at your table. You can definitely go out of order. You don't have to do number 1 first because you're probably not going to find number 1 first. You're going to find the stack of cards, and then you're going to have to switch with tables because I only have 3 sets. All right? And find the ones that you need to fill in the rest of this chart. Okay?